Hey guys, it's Jeff from Home Renovision. Today I've done a video. It's dedicated to all the homeowners out there that don't have a $30,000 workshop set up in your garage. We built these cabinets right here in the basement using this, a circular saw. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build it, how to set it up, and how to finish it. Cheers. So basically what this is, it's kind of like a grinder with an attachment, but it has a wood cutting blade on it. And you set it on your material, and then you push it forward. And you can see how the blade sticks out. Okay? And that's what it cuts. It operates like this. This is called a biscuit, and it's like a doweling system, and it goes in the hole. Look at that, all right? And you do the same hole on the next piece of wood, and what you do is you add some glue and you stick it all together. So really the whole system is just mark center, line up on center, do all your holes, glue it all together, add a few nails or screws, boom, you have an instant cabinet. So we're gonna go through the build. I have at least a dozen or more tricks up my sleeve here to make this possible with only a couple tools. One more secret weapon we have today. We have our basic DeWalt cross line laser. We're gonna use that to throw a line on the wall. This is going to be to determine the height of my cabinet. Yeah, I know I'm gonna be painting this, but for the purpose of organizing our thoughts today, I have a 19-foot wall. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build an 8-foot cabinet, 8 feet, because that's the size the plywood comes in. Life is simple when you work with what you got. I'll do another 8 feet on this side. We're gonna hang both of these on this laser line, and then whatever's left, we're gonna build a cabinet to fit in the middle. That, my friends, is how you work smart. These will be cut into threes because 32, 32, and 32 is 96. Ha! Life is simple. We'll have 6 drawers and then 1 open cabinet with a shelf. After that, we're going to build the towers for each side, and we're going to keep things simple. When you're designing, design practical. The more practical you design, the more success you're going to have. All we really have to do now is determine the height of our cabinet. We'll adjust our laser line accordingly. Right now I'm at 33 inches. If I go much higher with my finish, I'm not gonna have a lot of room to the plug. And I don't wanna go much higher than that. I'm liking 34 just because I like a whole number, okay? That's how you make a mark when you're gonna set your laser level from distance. Now I'm just gonna adjust my line here. I'll lift it up on the magnet until I get to that spot. Very important that we have this established. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build the first box. We're gonna build it with a French cleat on the back side. We're gonna install the French cleat on the wall and then drop the box into position. Nice and simple, and I'm gonna do it right here, right now. And because we're using the plywood and we're painting to finish, we don't need any edge banding, we don't need an iron, we don't need the glue on strips. We're just gonna use a little bit of this, little wood filler, that's it. Do some touch-ups and a paint, palm sanding to finish, and that's all we need. So we need a little bit of number 8 screws, because after we put our glue and our biscuit together, we're gonna wanna tighten it up, and we're gonna use a filler to fill over the screw holes, and we're gonna wanna do a drill bit that has a number 8 screw pilot hole dimpler. That way when we put in our screw, we're not forcing things apart. We're not going to delaminate the plywood when we go cross grain. That's the whole system right there. Before we start building something, let's just take time to prep our walls. We need to know where we're going to attach things and finalize our design plans. All I did was go to the Home Depot and I cut 2 different sizes of wood. So what I did is I scratched it all out in my head and I said, I'm going to need a 16-inch deep cabinet. Plywood comes 48 inches wide. The blade on the saw at the Home Depot is a 1/4 inch. So if I cut everything at 15 and 7/8, I get all the pieces pretty much the same size. And then it's easy for me to work with it once it's here, because I don't have a huge table saw. I don't have an outfeed table. I don't have all those tools. All I've got is a tiny little rigid. So before we move forward, let's know what we're doing. We're gonna have a stud over here. Got my zircon stud finder. Of course, the box is on the right-hand side. So I know there's a stud here. 2 ways I can do this. For me, the fastest way is to just take my tape measure next to the box, and then everywhere I got a red square on my, I know that is the right side of a stud. This is the basement. It's framed 16 inches on center. I don't have to go do a whole lot of math here. I don't have to do my stud sensor over and over and over and over and over again. I just have to find one spot and go. There we are. And of course there's one here. And of course I know that the stud is on the left side of every one of these marks. I can put a little X if I want to, just to remind myself. I can go to the other side as well. Finish this off. Piece of cake. Here's a fun note. Before we move forward with our plan, we need to identify one more thing. How square is the corner? Okay. Wow. Yeah, I'm out a 1/2 inch. Over, what's that, a 12-inch square? So I'm gonna be out 3/4 at 16 for sure. Which means if I have a 16-inch deep cabinet, then coming square off the corner, and then on top of that I have a 12 for the tower, I'm gonna need a filler in this area right here. That's probably gonna be 3/4 inch plywood, maybe 1/2 inch plywood, maybe a combination of both with a little bit of caulking and some filler before we can paint it all in. Point is, we're gonna get all of our cabinets installed, fix up all the defects, and then do our final coat of paint and make everything perfect. When we're measuring, we're gonna measure off the back line, and then we'll worry about our fillers and details later. See if the other corner's the same. Yeah. Okay, so the back wall will be the smallest distance, and then when it gets wider as it comes out, we're gonna cut fillers for it. That's a pain in the butt, but we're just gonna move forward because that's not gonna affect how we build our cabinets. Here we go. Step number 1, knowing how we're gonna build it. I'm gonna take one of my pre-cut pieces that are 15 and 7/8. My bad, I forgot. I had them cut it at 15 and 7/8. This is gonna be the bottom. I'm gonna use another piece as the top. And because we're gonna make them exactly 8 feet long, we're going to put interior gables instead of attaching it to the side. So we're gonna measure from here up, and we're gonna cut a piece for here, and then we're gonna have a drawer, and then we're gonna cut 2 pieces for here because I wanna have the face of the drawer close on wood for both faces. So we're gonna put a double one here, a double here, and a single here. Let's get those cut right now. Real quick, always take time to check both sides of your wood. In a lot of cases, one side will be nicer than the other. The good side you want to be on the underside because we're cutting with a saw that cuts in this motion. You'll get your clean line on the underside, not on the top. The other thing we want to do is we want to consider the height. What's the height of our drawer going to be? If we go with a 16-inch cabinet, that gives us nice clearance underneath. That's plenty of storage, and it's also the same thickness of material that I cut at the saw. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can have all my drawer faces cut right off of one of these slabs and it'll be perfect. So let's just go ahead with that. We'll make everything 16 tall. In order to get 16 tall, I have to take the thickness of 2 pieces of material, which is 1.5 inches because it's 3/4 inch plywood. Take it off to 16, we're gonna cut 14.5 inches. That's that simple. So what we're gonna make right now is we're gonna call it the gable jig. So I need it to be 14.5. Now, in order to make it 14.5, I have to consider my saw. This is my cut line on the saw right here. So I'm gonna make my jig exactly 4 3/4 shorter than this line. Now, how perfect your math here isn't as crucial. It's making sure everything you cut is exactly the same size. If we're gonna make a mistake, make it on the short side. It's okay if a drawer face doesn't cover the whole cabinet. It can be a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. As long as everything is uniform, it'll all look intentional. Now, we're gonna cut this. Let's see what our measurement was, 9 3/4. This is the only time we're gonna have to use our clamps. I'm gonna swing around that to the other end, clamp it and cut it. So all I did is take a 2x4, use my square, put my original measurement, because I measured off the plate. So now I get to use my saw to cut my jig, and it'll be perfect. What makes a jig is not just to have the right depth, but to have an L shape. So I'm gonna cut another strip off of here. That's about 1.5 inches wide. And I'm gonna do that just by using the old French table saw technique. I'm gonna use my finger as a guide. I don't mind a little overkill. I had to cheat, the material is just too light. Okay, job site table. We're gonna now stand this up on end, slide a 2x4 against it. Now I got a working station. And I'm gonna pre-drill a couple of holes, set some screws. And the reason I'm doing this, isn't it cool? Great little gizmo, right? Most important part of this is that when you throw a screw into the end grain of a small piece of plywood, the only thing that happens if you don't pre-drill is it splits the grain apart. And you're not holding into nothing. All right, now I have a jig. This is the size of all my gables. I'm doing 2 boxes exactly the same. 1 on the end, 2 in the middle, 2 in the third, and the 1 on the end. 6 times 2 is 12. I need 12 pieces that are all completely identical. Here's how we do it. There we go. This is about as sexy as it gets, because I can stay square to this. If my jig is way off the end of the table like this, I'm just gonna slide them together, and I'm gonna make 12 of these things. One. The biggest issue with this when you're working with portable tools is that you're going to be the inconsistency here. Little twist in the wrist, whatever, right? Okay, that's pretty darn close. What we get with pretty darn close is pretty darn close. And so any gaps or cracks that are going to appear in this build are going to appear and they're going to disappear with caulking. So let's not get too worked up over it. This is all the same material depth, which is fine on the edges, but I have another consideration. I've got 2 doubles. Now, what do we do with this? Do we want to have 3 different French cleats, try to establish where they are on the wall, make sure there's enough screws and locations, or do we want to just take off 3/4 of an inch off of each of these so that we can have 1 French cleat on the entire cabinet? I think that makes a lot more sense. So now I'm going to take 4 of these and cut back the thickness of the material, because we're going to cut a French cleat out of a piece of full-length 3/4 plywood. And if you haven't seen what a French cleat is before, stick around because we're going to show you. We have an option here. We're going to cut 3/4 of an inch off. Now you can do that just by tracing it on the material, and then you can clamp it, and blah, 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 and run the skill saw through it. Or If you're like most of us, you'll at least have a job site table saw for doing tiny cuts. I told you in the beginning you can do this and build the whole thing, but for me, I'd rather have this perfect so when I nail my French cleat in the back, I have no variances. So I'm gonna get a little picky here. I'm gonna cut these four the right way. So I just extended my table a little bit, made room enough, lined this up so that the blade will cut the pencil and the rest of the material off, and that should be pretty perfect. All right, so I've got 96 inch, that's my length. I've got 6 gables at 0.75, right? 2 is 1.5, 3 times that is 4.5 inches. That leaves me with 91.5 inches. I'm gonna have 3 sections that I need to make. That's easy. That's 0.5 times 3 is 1.5. So I need 30.5 inches in between all of my material. So now I'm gonna get a 1/2 inch piece of that material. I'm gonna cut a 30.5 inch piece, and I'm gonna use that as a template to locate all of my stuff and make sure everything stays square. This is the most precise math I've gotta get, because if I'm gonna build a bunch of drawers based on this template, which I'm gonna use later for the drawers, the holes in the drawers have all gotta be precise. So I can't mess around here. It can't be out even a hair. 30.5. So I'm gonna cut to leave that pencil line. First thing I gotta do is find out if this is all set up properly. Oh, Lord, no. Good point, Jeff. I'm cutting right to left. Maybe I'll cut over here. Yeah, if I do that, I'm cutting away too much material. So I'm gonna release this, move this back the thickness of my blade. Now, this might take a minute to set up if you don't have a really nice table saw. Here we go. I wanna just get to the edge of that pencil mark. I think I'm good to go. I'm going for it. All right. Perfect. All right, see, the whole system here revolves around making a couple of templates so that you can be consistent and repetitive and get a great result. So now I've got that, let's clear the table up and build the first cabinet. So what we're looking for here is biscuit locations. So I'm just going to mark on my pencil on the gable side and on the end panel on both ends, just to make this really easy to identify. Here we go. Okay, the biscuit joiner works in two different directions because this plate's been set the same thickness as the material. I can actually go this way and plunge a biscuit. Just looking right here. And, okay. About to glue some biscuits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, here we go. I'm gonna fill up these gaps. Get a wet rag, have it around so you can always wipe off the excess. You don't wanna try to scrape it out later. I'm using number 10 biscuits. And as long as I did a nice plunge, there should be lots of room for that to stick in. Okay, here we go. All right, now, why am I not going in here? It's not an exact science, shall we say. The first goal is to make sure you're flush on the front. This one is lacking. Usually a couple of love taps can solve that problem. Yeah, gonna get rid of that extra glue. And then before the glue sets up, one of the reasons why we're working on an 8-foot table to make an 8-foot box, so I'm going to just flush this over. Boom. Now I'm going to put in some screws on the backside. So we did the biscuits on thirds, so we're just going to pre-drill and set up a couple of screws here. Make sure that we can hold all this nice and tight while we're working. I'm using 1¼ screws, number 8. That should hold it all nice and tight. All right. Now, is that the right height? Yes. The right depth? Yes. This is the back of the cabinet, and this is the gap that we're leaving to attach our French cleat. In order to do these properly, I've got to put a couple of screws in them. Let me see, sitting a little bit nicer. I'm just going to throw a couple of screws into these panels, hold them nice and flush. Now, we're going to repeat, then we're going to get the template and guarantee that everything is exactly the same size before we move any further. Let's see how close our math is. Here's my drawer template for the first cabinet. Takes me there. Second drawer template takes me there. Now, we're just going to test it all out before we start using any fasteners. That's the right location. Well, I feel like I messed that up, don't I? Yep, something's wrong with my math. Let's try this again. So it turns out that I was just a hair off and a hair off, and a hair times a hair times a hair is almost a quarter. So it was worth the double check. All right, now you can see my second line is just a hair on the inside of the old one. I'm gonna mark that. It might look like I'm being a little bit picky here, but I am, and there's a reason for that. Here's my other drawer. I'm being picky because if I'm gonna mass produce 6 drawers that are all the same, I've gotta have the ability to make sure all these gaps are identical. So we're gonna put the template down here and check from that pencil to that pencil. I'm still a little bit bloody long. Isn't that something? Gonna take off another 1/16. Okay. There we go, third line. I'm gonna be just a little bit off in the wrong direction this time. Okay, here we go. We're gonna split the hair now, loving it. That template will now officially work. Now, there's no way for me to add biscuits here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take the template, lay it in the hole, close it up nice and tight. Throw my square in as well, pre-drill from the backside, and then add some wood screws. Are you shitting me right now? Now that just makes it so much easier to do the rest. Now we got it started. We're gonna use the square on the backside as a guide to know where the other screws go. Put in the filler, we put in the square, and we make sure we got some compression here. Pre-drill. There we go. Now because there's 2 panels, we want to have 1 screw in each, just for good measure. Now that we got everything squared off with the template and the square, we use this as a reference. Here's that panel right here. And the one next door. What in the hell? I gotta tighten the Allen key on that. All right. We'll get that reset. This is actually really good to know because depending on your material, you want to set your depth. And I am trying to screw in 1¼ inch, including this little dimple right here. So that's a good depth. We'll just tighten the set screw get yourself one of these. This has got every major standard operating unit alive out there. When my 16 gauge nailer broke, I had to put Allen keys in here to take that assembly off. This actually was a save my bacon. $7. Be surprised how much money you can save fixing your own tools. Template out, roll this over. Starting to look like a cabinet. Next set. So of course we're going to set more biscuits. So the top and bottom are joined with biscuits and glue, and then we'll add some screws again. All right. Okay. Now, I want to just mark my locations for my biscuits, both ends, and then we'll flip it over and stick those on. Yeah, now all we got to do is make sure a little bit of a hammer, a couple of screws. And yes, I know this is the top, but it doesn't matter because we're going to fill them. We're going to hang it off the French cleat, which entitles the top and the gables and the ends, and everything will be held together with wood glue and with screws. We're almost ready to hang this on the wall and try it out. I'm excited. Next up is French cleat. All right, yeah, that's much easier. All right, now I'm just going to take my template out and square off my gables and screw in this side. Look at the opportunity I have here to roll back and forth. I can push back and forth to get the nice flush front up against my gable, my panel, roll, roll, roll. In order to cut the cleat, I want to screw it to my counter and literally do a French table saw. So here's going to be simple. I also had some of the 3/4 stock ripped at 12 inches. I'm going to end up ripping this in half twice to make 2 French cleats, once for each of the cabinets. I'm just lining up my pencil mark for my inside cabinet depth and throwing a square on it. All right, in order to make a French cleat, really it's not that tricky. We're almost 12. We're going to go, we'll call it just before 6. 5 7/8. So this is where it's interesting, right? Because here's a renovator using renovation tools for woodworking. But you know what? At the end of the day, a chalk line makes a straight line. I don't care what you're making. Here we go. Now, in order for me to do this properly, this is one cleat, this is the second. This cleat's going to go half and half. And so I'm going to be measuring 3 inches and 3 inches. I'm going to chalk line both lines. One is for the cleat and one is for the totality of the piece. This will actually make both cabinet cleats. It's all about how you use the space. There we go. So first thing, because we've got this wonderful workbench, I am going to screw this on with an overhang. As long as that cabinet's there, there's enough weight to hold it all together. There we are. And for the French cleat, we're going to turn our saw to 45 degrees. There's the arrow, there's my mark. Boom. Now when I'm cutting on 45 degrees, you'll see on the saw, it says 45 here. That's actually my cut line. So instead of going with my regular line, now that my blade is in a different location as it passes through the plate, that's the spot I want to mark. And I want to keep that in line right here. As long as I cut with that on that, it cuts straight. And the beautiful thing about this is, whether it's cut right or not is kind of irrelevant because it fits together like a glove once it goes on the wall. And am I coming through the other side? Yes, we're good to go. That ate a whole lot of battery. You can hear how hard the saw is fighting, even with the really good quality blade on there. And now they're both eaten. There's got to be one more good battery around here to finish this off. Truth is, the batteries were being used anyway. I'm not just killing 3 batteries on this cut, but it does take a lot of power to go 1 to 45. End of the discussion. It's a lot thicker material when you go that way, and it's hard to push in the right direction without causing friction and the blade to twist and turn. So there you go. At the end of the day, if you got a small job site table saw to pull this off, great. Now I'm gonna list this as the bottom. Now, I also want to do one more thing. Remember how I talked about the wall wasn't square with the back? I want to give myself a little bit of mercy on this cleat. I'm going to take about 1.25 inches off of each piece. On each end. Because what I want to do is I want this cabinet to sit comfortable on this cleat without having any pressure. So we'll cut straight and you'll see how much easier that is for the saw. All right. There it is. Okay. Now we know what that's for. We'll just set it aside for the next box. Now, this is the bottom, and it gets screwed to the wall. So let's call this the wall. Now, if I put this in the cabinet like this, and when I hang the cabinet on the wall, this is how they'll come together, right? And automatically pull it tight to the wall. That's that simple. So all I do is I take the measurement of the two pieces together, which is 5 3/4. And then I take my laser line. Now remember our laser line, I haven't moved that machine. That's my top. I got 5 3/4 cleat plus the 3/4 inch top. Gives me a full 6 inches from this point down here. So there is the bottom of my cleat. That's my line. And I'll do that same mark over here. The best thing about a cleat is once I have the cabinet on the wall and I have the other cabinet on the wall, I have the ability to move it around. Because until I drive surface screws into the studs, I'm not actually hanging the cabinet, I'm just setting it in place. So the cleat isn't designed to carry all the weight. It's just designed to carry the weight until you can get to the installation. Ultimately, the top rail, this 3/4 inch piece of plywood by 3 inch thick, will carry the weight of the entire cabinet. And as long as there's contact with the cleat, it gives extra protection from it rolling over. That's how you get the floating effect, okay? So the more precise you can be with these cuts, the better you'll get as far as the result. Ultimately, I think we're gonna be just fine. That's why we marked all the studs, so we can have multiple locations to screw everything in. Okay, so I've got my pencil mark, I got my cleat. I can hold it in the middle, kind of balance it. I'm not worried about the laser line right now. I wanted to be off the corner, and I gave myself a little mercy. I'm more concerned about this right here, being right on that pencil, and then right on a stud. And I missed it. I'm not sure why. But we're gonna find the other pencil mark. Here we are. Get on that stud. So here we go. Okay, so again, I have to pre-drill, and I don't want to have a screw in the first inch and a quarter. It's 3/4 plywood on a 45, 3/4 plywood. But I like to just go play a little bit safe. All right. Make sure we're hanging that on both of those boards. All right, we're also going to go off the end and off the top. Okay, now it's up to you how off you want to screw. 3/4 inch plywood is incredibly strong, and it's stronger than most subfloor. So even if I put it every 16 inches, there's enough transfer of load to follow traditional building guidelines, but we're going to follow commercial guidelines. Instead, we're going to put a screw every foot from one to the next, which makes this act like subfloor in a commercial space, which is like a church where there's thousands of pounds in every row. And then we don't have to think twice about what we're doing. We're not trying to set something up where people can sit on this bench. We're just trying to set it up so that it doesn't fall off the bloody wall. Right? I don't have to make the best cabinet in the world. I just got to make sure that I don't screw up. We have to pre-drill because we're going into the grain, and we don't want the screws delaminating. If you missed that concept the first time, this only holds power if you don't delaminate the plywood. Okay. And we're going to drop them just a little bit beyond the surface, so there's room for us to add our wood filler and sand it back smooth so that we can prime and paint. Now here comes the moment everybody's been waiting for. Does Jeff have a sweet clue what he's doing? Let's get our laser level and we'll see how close we end up with our finished project here. Now remember, this is just the skeleton. I'm going to put it on the wall just to confirm that I'm not an idiot and then I can go to sleep. Okay, this is going to weigh the same as a full sheet of 3/4 inch plywood. So, you know, be warned. I'm on the wrong side of this to install it, aren't I? Okay, all right. We're gonna get it nice and tight and flush, and then drop it down on that cleat. Now let's see how we're doing. We're sitting high over here, and that is because, like every other wall in the world, it's not perfectly flat. So what we're gonna do is we'll adjust the depth that we've installed the cleat on the bottom and allow this to drop in place. Okay, well, that's about as sexy as things get in my neighborhood. We can do a little bit more tweaking. I can adjust the cleat in and out, and I can move this box and get it perfectly level. But for now, this is what I need. I'm actually sitting pretty square off that corner, oddly enough, because when I had squared the corner to this, I didn't take into account that this was actually the dip in the wall. So this actually requires no filler, which is why, do the far outsides, when you get to it, we can customize this middle gap to fit perfect. All right, now I'm gonna do the same thing over and over again off camera. But next, let's build our tower. Now that we got a location and we got it something level, we have the ability to measure and build our tower to fill. Right on, let's get at it. Welcome back, guys. We're here in the next day, we're doing some priming, okay? And what I've done is I've set up a spray station. Now, the walls are only one coat of paint, and I put a 12 by 15 tarp on the ground and a few sheets of OSB just to make sure that if we have drips or whatever else going on, nothing's gonna penetrate back to that engineered hardwood. I'm using my sprayer. I've got the machine set up and cleaned out. We're just using regular drywall primer. There's nothing special here. What we're looking for to prime the wood is just basically a flat latex paint. So drywall primer, even sealing paint, it was gonna work great for this application. The idea is we just want to get it sealed, and then we're going to give it another light sand and then put the finish coat on. We've actually turned the pressure way down. So we're going to reduce overspray, and we're going to get rid of any of the fingering. And fingering, I mean, you'll have a spray pattern and then a gap and then a really solid line. And every paint is different, so you got to adjust as you go, okay? See that? That gets a nice full coat. We'll hit an edge and another edge. The idea here is we want to get 3 sides. Then we're going to flip it over once it's dry and do the other 3 sides. That takes about 2 hours to dry, depending, of course, on the conditions in the home. I want a nice, full, even coat. These are the drawer faces. They don't have much of an option other than to be sexy. So, want to make sure we don't put too much paint on at the same time. Here we go. Now you might be wondering, Jeff, why are you working without a mask, you crazy fool? Do I look like I'm getting covered in paint? Flat primers, they don't have any acrylics, they don't have any real toxins in them. I'm not too concerned about it. It's no different than painting a wall. Now when I do my finish coat, I'm gonna wear a mask because there are additives in those kind of paints that make the surface nice and hard that you don't want to be inhaling. So that's overspray is a little bit different. So we're gonna let that dry. We're gonna, if we get it flipped over, we'll do the other side. Then we'll do the next process here, which is to give it a light sanding. Always sanding, always sanding, always sanding. I've got my compressor here, and once the sanding is done, we're gonna give it a quick blow with the blower on the compressor just to remove any dust, all right? You could use a tack cloth if you want, but I don't want to spend 3 hours tack clothing all this, so I'm just going to use my compressor and blower, get her done. I just wanted to say that doing cabinet on site, you're going to have some issues, right? One of them is the end grain. Now, after you prime, you can sand pretty much anything smooth, including the edges, just with a little palm sander like this. And that comes out pretty darn good. But you look at this side here, it's not quite as smooth. There's just going to be some inconsistencies. What I'm going to suggest is that before you paint, you take your palm sander like this, not mechanical. It'll eat right through the paint. And you go around and you identify those areas that are just a little rough. Grab a little bit of the Drydex on here, okay? With a tool, and just tool in those rough areas. All right, this stuff here is going to set up in about 10 minutes, maybe 15. Okay, and then you can give it a light sand and you'll have a perfectly finished surface. That's all we have to do here, okay? That's the preparation. There's a lot of it. It's gonna take a couple of hours to get all this done. So for the purpose of you guys at home not having to endure me doing this for 2 hours, I'm just gonna show you a few other things. Get a hold of these from Hyde. We use the Hyde circular disc sander. These are just little triangles. They're just setting things up for propping up your cabinets. When you're gonna spray with an air tool, if your cabinet's flat on the ground, your trapping air is gonna blow right back in your face. It's gonna make a hell of a mess. So get it up off the ground so the air air that you're blowing in can be dispersed. Okay, that's the secret. One other thing, you're gonna have issues with potentially raised grain. Let's take a look at this part right here. So here's the area here. I think this just got a little bit too much paint. And so the moisture content caused that to bubble, all right? And if I sand that back, I'm not sanding paint. Now I'm sanding wood, okay? And that's fine. If I have to sand the wood back because I caused it to peel and get a little bit of grain, that's okay. For this, I'm gonna take my palm sander, smooth it out. I'm gonna give it a quick dusting with the primer again and not over prime it. And then we're gonna be ready to go. All surfaces need a quick wipe. No matter how smooth they look, you will feel the difference. It is night and day. So this is sanded and unsanded. Okay? Yeah. Smooth? Not smooth. All right, watch this. Smooth? Smooth. Exactly. It's not a lot of work. You don't have to pull out a machine. Just a quick palm sander. Give everything a nice surface. You can tell by the touch if it needs another more sanding, okay? Be particular. The first coat of paint that you put on the finished paint, you want to wait until you can be particular. That's just the bottom line. You don't want to have to sand everything smooth once that coat is on, because you'll be coming back to possibly wood, and now you're 3 stages behind. So don't do that to yourself. Be particular. Be picky. Okay, check all your edges, make sure everything's gonna be smooth. I got one more thing I wanna show you. These are the towers, right? And the whole tower is covered with exposed edges, and we didn't pay any attention to it. We're going to be installing this material on top to create the gap so that it can fit snug in the corners. We're gonna do it across each of these as well, and across the top. So it's just about trimming this out. Just measure, cut, a couple of brad nails and some adhesive, and then this is all ready to paint. So that is how we are going to get a factory look with the towers, because this, as a finished surface, looks amazing. These drawers are gonna cover the entire bank, top to bottom. So they'll look amazing. This is gonna be exposed. So this surface right here, this is the one I'm most concerned about. This one has to be absolutely perfect. So take your time, use the Drydex. Even right now, you can see this is coming in. Okay, pink is going away. It's already looking amazing. It's almost ready to sand. This does not take a lot of time, but be particular, all right? You get to be your own judge here. You don't want to move forward and start painting until you've got this prep absolutely as wonderful as you can make it. It's not like painting a wall. We're not going to do a quick little prime check here. This particular stage you want to have perfect, because the first coat of paint you put on, you want to do a light dusting, and then after 2 hours you want to come and give it a quick sand, and then you want to put a good full spray on. You don't want to have to do anything else. We want to try to make sure everything's perfect as it can be before we pull out the spray painter. That's going to be absolutely crucial. Now I'm just going to get to work. I'm going to cut and install my trims, do all my sanding and all my repairs, and then we're going to start spraying. One tool you're going to want to have, compressor, okay? This will help clean all the dirt out. There we go, perfect every time. Now you can see now that I'm done my sanding, I had a couple of raised edges. Obviously they got too much paint, but they still need primer. We're just not gonna overdo it. Beautiful. The goal here is for me to go and finish trimming everything out and finishing softening out my edges. While this dries, as soon as I'm done that, I'm gonna start the first coat. What I'll do is I'll switch the paint over from the primer to my finish paint, and then I'm gonna paint the backside of all my drawer faces. Most likely, everything that's in this line will be primer. And then it'll transition into our finish paint. I can start at the other end of the room, start working my way through all this process. Now, we're gonna go with one coat, we're gonna sand, we're gonna blow it again, and we're gonna do another coat. And if necessary, we'll do a third, but we're not gonna stop until we're completely happy. And we've gotta be careful. We don't wanna overpaint and get drips, because drips are your enemy. Drips require mechanical sanding, and that takes you back a couple steps. So take it easy. This is not a race, this is about perfection. All right, so I've got these cabinets all set up with first spray. Okay, it's all done, one coat. So I got primer and first coat of the spray. So now we got to sand. Every time you want to touch these things, you've got to sand. Okay, so I'm going to spray the top. I'm going to show you how that looks. I got to wet rag this thing. I don't want to leave the dust on there before I spray. It was one thing to blow the dust out with the compressor in order to prime. It's another thing to get a smooth finish. So have a few where it rags around. I am using the C2 cabinet and trim paint. You're probably smart to buy yourself a respirator to do the whole job, and I'm gonna wear mine. But for the purpose of showing you this, we'll give it a couple of dust lines and you're gonna see not a real big issue. But I set this cabinet up here because part of my process today is to set the towers in place in a couple of hours and to finish off the trim work. All right, here we go. There we go. A light dusting. Now you can see in the light, everything is wet. Nice even coat, except for right here. There we go. As you can see, we are this close to getting this finished. I'm just gonna install a drawer and show you my system, and then I've got to give everything a light sanding and one more last spray. So this is the face of the drawer. My system is really simple. I'm gonna be using 1 inch. I know that says 1 1/4, but I got 3 kinds of screws here. I'm gonna be using 1 inch screws to attach my 1/2 inch plywood to my 3/4 inch face. Because it's gonna be a little precarious, getting these started early just makes the project go a lot quicker. Okay, now we've got the drawer slides. They close inside of themselves. So this cage, you actually want to have flush to the outside, right here. Line that up, and so then, there's lots of opportunities to put screws in, but I designed this system here. I just grabbed some hardboard panels from the local building store, and I'm gonna raise up my slides 1/8 of an inch off the ground, and the drawer as well, so that everything is gonna be able to move freely. And I'm using 1 1/4 inch to drive those screws in. Remember, everywhere I've got a panel, it's 2 layers of 5/8. So I'll do this one on camera here. We're bringing this up to the front. I'm gonna be pushing down and pre-drilling a hole. Just because it makes this a lot easier to put in, and I'm not left-handed. I find it easier to work with the drill upside down on my left hand. I use my pinky as the trigger finger here. And then I can use my weight. There's a gap in the back here for another screw. Okay, same thing. Now that everything is in position, I don't mind getting up here and getting 1 more screw. There we go. All right, same thing for the other side. Step 1 is done. Put the drawer on. Remember, we built this so that there was a 1/2 inch gap available on each side, which is exactly the thickness that we need, and like a 1/16 or maybe a 32nd of an inch. We're gonna be using number 8 1/2 inch screws, because the ones that came with the hardware are Phillips, and you all know that I'm not gonna sit here messing around with tiny little Phillips screws all day long. And we just set this up to be near the front. All right, beautiful. I'm gonna pull this out a little bit more, and the little hardboard actually helps to carry all the weight and keep everything level. And then we'll go fully extended. And there's 1 more location in the back. Okay, this is a soft close. Okay, that works great. Now we just gotta get the face of our drawer on here. To do that, we gotta get our laser level turned on. Doing this is a little bit on the tricky side. All right, so what I wanna do is eyeball 1 location, and I'm looking at the gap between my drawers here right now. I wanna get my laser level on the top corner of my wood, so that when I'm not supporting it, okay, what I can do is I can use my square to check. That's gonna rub, and I still got lots of room here. Trying to move this over is really maddening, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna draw a pencil line flat on the drawer, and that'll be my stop. Now, I'm gonna take this side off first. Double check over here. No, too far that way. When I was doing all this earlier, I was doing this with my son Matt. It was a hell of a lot easier with a second pair of hands. This is the do-it-yourself channel, not do it with your neighborhood. Now I'm gonna just adjust my height again. Okay, 1 more chime. Yes. Gotta be kidding me. Right back where I started, Max. Okay, 1 more try. Got my gap, got my gap. Now those 3 screws that we have preset, we're just gonna bury those flush. Okay, all right. Now, here goes everything. Oh, there's a slight rub. It's rotated a little high on the left side. That's not a big issue. If you don't get it right the first time. All right, so what I'm doing there is I'm driving that bottom screw, because I've got 2 pieces of wood, and I held it open, and I drove the screw, and it maintained the gap, and I'm leaving the gap to line up with this drawer here, and I'm gonna tighten up the top so it doesn't go anywhere. Whoops. There we go. The only thing left for me to do now is give everything a quick little sand. I'm gonna do 1 more coat of spray finish with the drawers open so that we can get a nice clean face and it's my last chance to do any little touch-ups. Next thing we gotta do is we gotta take the left tower, the one that removes, and I gotta put the false back into that, and you're gonna be able to see how that looks now that it's all finished up. So here's our cabinet, and like I said, the ceiling part is all mounted up there now. Because if we ever need to have access to that plumbing, it's gonna make one hell of a mess in the basement. So here we go. And this whole cabinet, you can pull the drawers out. There's 3 screws on the French cleat, and this 1/3 just lifts right off and you can walk away with it. That makes this accessible. But I need to put in this false back into this cabinet. Okay, from the wall, 7.5 inches. I better measure the same direction. 7.5 inches. That'll be the back of my hardboard panel. Okay. All right, I'm gonna just simply screw all these things in here. Nice. Yep, that's gonna work great. Okay, now. I measured this to be pretty darn exact, so I actually have to slide this in first. Maybe too darn exact, eh? Woo! There we go. I'm gonna use 1-inch screws just to make sure that I don't come through the other side while I'm putting this in. Now, there we go. We're just gonna set this on my pencil marks. Okay. Okay. Just gotta be careful. I made this out of scrap wood. It is not all the same thickness, so I just gotta line up my corners there. That's actually a nice finish. Wow. There's not a whole lot you can do with this to keep it from moving around. We can probably throw a couple of surface brads in there or something, but honestly with a hardboard panel, you're better off to just leave it alone and just set it in place. And then put something sturdy and sexy up here. Like a figurine or something, I don't know. Let's get this back in position. You want to get on the counter. There we go. Now it's just time to dust this down, get a damp rag, and wipe all the dust off, and give it another spray. Awesome. Well, here we are, finished project. $600 cabinet build on job site. I'm telling you right now, as a DIYer, you can save a lot of money. You could go and contract this project out, and they're gonna cost you $10,000 to $15,000 for custom built-ins of this size and magnitude. Do it yourself, save a lot of money, earn equity in the home. You are your own best contractor. Cheers till next time.